Hi, this is Jeff Blauette, technical agronomist with Cooperative Farmers Elevator, and on this week's Field Friday segment, I thought I'd probably try and get ahead of what's going to be, very likely one of our bigger corn spraying weeks next week. We're already getting started here this week. As this weather has warmed up, finally we've gotten some sunshine and so forth, and there is some chances of some precip this weekend, but when we can get back after the weekend, a lot of this corn is going to need to start to be sprayed. We've had some of these April planted fields, the pre-plant herbicide's been out here for a month or more, and then they're just going to start to wear out. And we all know our number one nemesis is water hemp, and this is what I see in a couple fields with some of these that are the residuals starting to break. You can see a lot of little water hemp here in this picture. A lot of stuff that's just come up very recently since this last rain, and that's going to continue to happen as these pre-plant herbicides we put on wear out. And that's the case in corn and beans. We had a lot of beans planted in April as well. A lot of that stuff's been out there a month, and that's kind of one of the first weeds that's going to break is water hemp because of how it operates and how tough it is. So, we're out in some corn here. This corn's got, really finally got its nodal root system starting to take off. This was planted fairly early. You're starting to look at 3 or 4 collar corn fairly commonly in these earlier planted fields. And that's a good time to start hitting the herbicide path so we can get going on this stuff. It is important to understand the stage of the corn. There are a few herbicides, namely one of the more common ones we use in corn with Status. We need to have at least 2 leaf collars or 4-inch tall corn before we can spray that. Most of the corn's going to be fine, but we need to understand that. And then we also need to understand how to stage this corn, as if we get some bad weather, some rain, some wind, and we can't get going and things get ahead of us. There is a size at which we really should have the herbicides on, or we're going to probably cause some problems. With a picture of the corn, this is a good picture of what V3 corn looks like. You've got 3 official collars where the leaf attaches to the stem, or wraps around the stem, you might say. And then the 4th one is not quite formed yet, but it will soon. So this would be a good V3, almost V4 corn. Like I say, the collar count is what you're really looking for when you're staging corn. But I guess we really want to get going on herbicides. We used to be in the mode that we wanted stuff to be up before we sprayed it so we could kill it. Water hemp's kind of changed that dynamic. We really need to get on that stuff as early as we can. Small water hemp is way easier to kill than large water hemp. This water hemp is only 3-4 inches tall, but you can look at all the growing points that it already has, and that becomes a lot tougher to kill when it's 3-4 inches tall versus when it's 2-inch tall. We're going to end up spraying some bigger water hemp, just the way that stuff can grow so fast. Some of that's going to be bigger than that when we spray it. We just need to understand what we're trying to do with the herbicides. We may need to go to higher rates, even with the Status or some of the other herbicides we're using if we can, if that stuff gets some size to it. The other thing that's critical, even though we've got pretty decent weed killing conditions, we have been in the 90s here this week. If we would miss the rain this weekend especially, we could start running into some stuff that might start to get a little bit hardened off with some extra wax on the leaves. Having the proper adjuvants added to the tank are pretty critical. There's studies done where they'll spray a herbicide on the leaf of a plant, wait 24 hours or so, and then wash the leaf off and see how much actually went into the plant and how much hung up on the leaf. Without any adjuvants, percentage is probably only in the 30% range that actually gets into the plant. With adjuvants, the right adjuvants, we can probably get it up to 75 to maybe even 80% of that herbicide gets in the plant. We never get 100% in, unfortunately, but obviously if we get 75% versus 30%, we're over double the amount of active ingredient, so that's like doubling the rate of what you put on. So I would recommend that you work closely with your CFE agronomist to make sure we get the right adjuvant mix, because they're not all the same for all herbicides, and we need to understand which is which. So with that, that's this week's Field Friday segment, and we'll see you next week.